All right, welcome everybody to the Sprint Jump Throw Performance Podcast. I'm Joel Reinhardt with my co-host Andrew Cormier. I'm lucky today to have Tony Holler on the show. World famous. Can we go world famous track coach, speed coach, co-starter and owner of Track Football Consortium, which is a great educational clinic and then website with materials. Thanks for coming on, Coach.
Yeah, thank you. I miss, as we were talking before we started taping, I miss the chance to talk to people anymore. You know, I listen to podcasts, but you can't talk back to that. So you're like the first adults I've talked to today.
Adult being a loose word, but
we can just start with what's something that you maybe have removed from the regular programs that people know of that you've done within the past year or so that maybe you haven't spoke about too much yet.
Stuff that I've removed. It's an interesting thing. I'm always thinking about what we can take. I probably put more time into looking at what we could remove than what we could add, because I've become more and more of an essentialist and a minimalist. Even though in a way, I'm engaged with speed training and track and the stuff I do like all day long, like from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed. I'm always trying to, lessen the window of actual practice time that my kids have. It just pisses me off when I think about the fact that we set kids into a desk at the age of 5 and we put them through 20,000 hours of school. 20,000 hours. And then coaches waste their time after school with practices that are too long. Most practices I see, you could take out at least 80% of what they do, and the positive, the net effect would be positive, that they could literally cut a basketball practice down to 35 minutes and have a better basketball practice than the basketball practice I actually get to witness every day. Is when we're training our track kids indoors, the freshman boys and the sophomore boys are both practicing, and it's just ridiculous. So I don't think I've taken out hardly anything, because we are so bare bones right now. I mean, anybody that comes to visit, and I always love for people to visit, they always kind of like, is this all you do? Or like, what do you do next? Are you in a hurry to get home? It's kind of ridiculous how little we do. Our average sprint practice is about 45 minutes. And that's only because we have 40 or 50 kids. If I was training 10 kids, it would probably take 30. So yeah, we're pretty much bare bones. So I don't have any answer at all for you on that one.
So the flip side of that is there anything you've added in the last, whether it's 6 months or from this track season to last track season, anything you added and then kind of why and how it went?
Yes. I'm always looking to, we have two types of workouts. We have speed workouts and we have X factor workouts. Our speed workouts are extremely boring. It is very repetitive. I break all the rules that you guys learned in getting your degrees that say that if you are not giving kids new things to adapt to, they'll never adapt to new things. And so our speed days are so much repetition, but I say, speed's pretty important for a track athlete. So you can never get bored with doing the important things. Just like you can't get bored with basketball players shooting the ball. You can't get bored with working the batting cage. If you're a baseball coach, you can't get bored with blocking and tackling in football. But coaches are constantly, I think coaches get bored. And so they change things up. So getting back on where we add things, it's not to our speed days typically, it's to our X factor days. Our X factor days, those are the days when we don't spike up and sprint and time and all those things. And it's the X factor days that we're really doing. I say the X factor is kind of an alternative to an off day. Like instead of taking an off day in between two sprint days, we do an X factor day. Now, what Charlie Francis would do on a non-sprint day would be he would run tempo runs. And as smart as Charlie is, and I agree with Charlie on much more than I disagree with him on. I mean, I would just argue to the end of the world with him if I had a chance that tempo running makes no sense at all. That we did, my program has done away with running, period. All we do is sprint and X factor. So we're constantly looking in X factor for new things. And I picked up a few things from Carol Gilbert Smith, who she's the coach at USC. And I saw a video of her doing a presentation. And she's really big on power. And so this year, we really refocused on bounding, both speed bounds and power bounds. I used to call them high bounds, but now I call them power bounds. But speed bounding and power bounding is huge right now in my idea of training on X Factor days. And one of the things we did with that, which I'm fascinated with this, I think it's Schrodinger, the physicist, or Heisenberg, one of the two, said that when we observe something, we change the thing that we are observing. And I love that because they're talking about, quantum physics and stuff. But when we really watch kids closely, they perform things better. When we video them, they perform things better. When we time them, they perform things better. So what we do with bounds, we started measuring bounds, like 2-footed start on a line. We'll give you 6 bounds. How far can you go? It was freaky how much different their bounding became. And it just goes back to the idea that when you measure stuff, you change the quality, the intensity. And so we did that. We did single-legged bounds and measured them. Sometimes we time wickets. That's another way. Like wickets are great, but you ought to put those 2 free lap things out there and watch how that changes the way kids do wickets. So those things are huge. We're doing a couple of other bounding off of a box and stuff. I would have to show it. It was just basically 1 foot up on a box. You've seen it before. You throw your hands in the air and go as high as you can. And you do like 5 of those and then switch. So I picked up some things from that Carol Gilbert Smith stuff, and I think she's probably pretty brilliant. And then I would say we added one thing to our speed days. I don't know are you guys into RPR?
Yep.
Are you? Okay. I've been in on it for, I guess, 6 years now because Chris Corfus was the first guy that brought Douglas Heel from Cape Town, South Africa, over to the States. And of course, Chris's good friend, Dan Fichter, actually saw Douglas Heel in Europe. And so that's how it all got started. And when Chris saw that I had started to write about 6 years ago, and he let me come for free. And of course, I wrote like 8 articles about Douglas and all that stuff. So I've been doing Be Activated, and now it's called RPR. I've been doing that for like 6 years, but I've only done it to our performers. I've only done it at track meets. I carry my massage table, all that kind of stuff, and I'll work on like my best 8 to 10 kids. And there's no question in my mind, we've been more durable, injury-free, and faster because of RPR. It's absolutely a game changer. But the weird thing is that we've never done it in practice. And people will say, when do you do it in practice? I go, we just don't do it. Like I'm kind of lazy, I guess. And, but with what we started doing this year is that we added RPR to our speed drills. And there is no textbook on this, like when do you do it and all that kind of stuff. So the first thing I tried was we're going to do one thing, like let's say we're going to do the rib thing, and then we're going to do high knees, and then we're going to do the psoas, and then we're going to do A skips. And so we did it piecemeal, like added in to the in-between times of speed drills. And what I evolved into was I'd tell my team, I'm going to give you give me 90 seconds of 100% focus, 90 seconds. And what we did is we went through all the RPR stuff, pretty much all of it, about six or seven different things in a 90-second time period, and probably got 10 really good belly breaths in with no talking, eyes on me. I would do it along with them. It made me feel better. So we would do a couple speed drills and then take 90 seconds of total intensity of breathing and focus on RPR. And I absolutely loved it. I think I'm onto something. But like I said, there's nothing that tells you how to add it in to your warm-ups. But deep down, I always knew I should. I just never did it. And I think the reason why I didn't do it is weird, is because I was afraid I would not get total focus from my guys. And I hate to get pissed off at people and, kick them out of practice and all that kind of stuff. But I found a way, I think, that I will keep doing. And when you say you can change kids in 90 seconds, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah,
for sure. I would even say, going off your point too, just with the warm-ups and everything, I had started to play around with almost starting off in the weight room of like blocks of exercise, almost right before the block started, of like, all right, this is our A block. We're going to hit these points, exercises that will be positively affected by it. And then we go next block and we hit other spots that also
Nice.
help carry it over too.
Now, have you found a way to get total buy-in though? Do your guys totally buy in, or do you have to fight them?
For the most part, it's pretty much buy-in. I don't really force it on people right away. It's almost waiting until they feel like they need something, like something's off and they can't tell what it is. And then we introduce that to them. And almost every time they'll notice a difference of how they feel or move. So at first, because I've started new jobs almost every year the past few years, just because I'm fresh out of school. And I wasn't like super aggressive with introducing it right away to everyone, because obviously it's kind of weird to like first thing I teach them is just how to like rub themselves. So it was more of like, let's set the tone with everything else. And then we'll start to like play around with it once I realize people need it, or if I think it would help, I'll be like, hey, I got something if you want to try it out.
Yeah, one of the things too I did this year, and I think it's partly because one of the reasons why I never incorporated it in practice is because my jumps coach was a chiropractor, and he hated it. He thought that no way should a hack like me get to put my hands on a kid and have results and all that, where he spent $10,000 to get certified in ART. I mean, I spent no money to get, quasi certified in whatever voodoo this is, but it works, So anyway, I always felt like, even though I loved him as a jumps coach, I always thought he was bad mouthing me to the kids behind my back. And so I only did it at meets. Well, this year he took a different job. So I was free from that dark cloud. And so I actually, to introduce it, I actually gave my clinic presentation. I actually have an RPR clinic presentation that I do with lots of anecdotal stories and a couple demos and this and that. And people are always riveted. I'm never excited about giving that because I'd rather talk about track. But every time I do an RPR thing at a clinic, I get, like the big eyes, people are like excited about hearing about this voodoo stuff. And so I did it for my kids, my distance group on one day and my sprinters on a different day. And it really went well. So matter of fact, my distance group actually had 6 parents that came and they wanted to see it. So if you can get parent buy-in, wow. So I think those 2 things really helped. But like my poor son, he's a football coach. I have 2 sons that are coaches, but one of them actually added it in this year at his high school, and he felt like the football staff, several of the assistants, did not buy in, and that makes it, as you know, very difficult if you have people who think it's a bunch of crap and they're not helping and participating. So I would always suggest to people who wanted to start the RPR thing with their team that they need to have somebody come in and sell it. If they can't sell it, somebody needs to come in and sell it to the group. It's like anything else. If you don't sell it, they're not going to buy it.
Yeah, I 100% agree. For me, the biggest thing was almost getting to like the upperclassmen on my teams, like in the college realm, because those guys will talk. Once you can make a senior who's all beat up by the time he's in his senior year of undergrad, he starts to feel better. He's going to tell his other classmates, and then everyone else is going to hear about it as well.
Yeah, two of the Eric Corum and Chad Dennis were both with the Houston Texans a couple years ago, and they introduced it there, and they just act like they're the NFL guys loved it. They just absolutely loved it. So, but just like what you said, they didn't push it. They didn't say, okay, all 50 of you start rubbing your rib right here. You know, they didn't do that. They just kind of like, hey, I got something that might make you feel better. And they're like, show me, you know, and then the word started spreading, and that's a good way to do it.
Yeah. I think the fear at first too is kind of like people don't fully understand it. And obviously all the science backing it's not even that readily available, but without fully understanding it kind of scares some of the, especially like sport coaches, because I certainly have some that don't fully get it, even though all the players are like, this is awesome. So
Yep.
Yeah. Even on we had not quite similar, but like some of our like super duper toned up dudes, we were pulling them aside and doing it kind of individually with them. And then they started chatting. And then now we've got, I've got a group of however many guys that are in there and knocking on my door before every practice and game being like, hey coach, can you hit me with that real quick? And then we even my boss reset our head coach, and we've done like a bunch of our position coaches come down and lift. So we were even just playing around with it on them. And like, our quarterbacks coach, I reset every morning of every game day. Like he comes down, because he's in the box calling plays, and he was like, I need it to kind of focus in. And like, I was like, all right. So even getting that like top down buy-in helped, because, we do it on our head coach, and he's like, whoa, that's amazing. And then it gives us a little, the freedom where if he sees me do it on the sideline during a game or whatever, it's not like, hey, what the hell are you doing? It's like, that's right. Okay, I know what that, so. I'm
glad you said that about the coaches, because I really, it's hard to establish, exactly why RPR is so great, because nobody understands it and there's no science behind it. But there's obviously the physical thing. Like I said, there is no question that my guys run faster. I mean, I can prove it. I mean, if we have, I've worked on people that have improved them from a 22 mile an hour to a 23 mile an hour sprinter with 5 minutes of work on the table. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing, the anecdotal proof I have. But the incredible thing, and I think it's just as important as the physical stuff that it causes, is the rebooting of the brain. I believe that we typically have cluttered brains, and clutter is not good for performance, and it's not good for anything really. Like one of the greatest things about RPR is, I don't know if you guys are big in track, but the 4x4 is a glorious race that nobody really wants to run, because you have actual fear of death, that maybe you're going to lock up and just not be able to finish the race, because it's just such a leap of faith. And so people come up to coaches all the time. It's kind of a joke. It's kind of like, coach, I don't think I can run the 4x4. And it's just amazing. Those people that come in with the ugly look on their face and the 11s in their head and everything, you say, get on the table, and you put them through everything, and they get off the table like, I'm ready. And I think it's just as mental as it is physical. And the idea that a play caller could benefit from RPR is 100% true, because you got to get all the clutter out of your brain, all the things that happen to you. You have to have 100% focus on what you're doing to be a good play caller. And I think RPR would be great for that.
Yeah. So with cycling back to the bounding. So with you having it on your X Factor days, when maybe not your low days is the right way to say it, but you're not sprint days, where you're saying like, okay, you're not timing, you're not in spikes. Did adding in the measurement of the bounds helped increase, outputs, but are you almost, did it ever cross your mind of like, maybe this is increasing them too much to the point that it starts leaking into your sprint days?
I knew where you're going with that, because um, because you would think that with the high CNS sprint days, let's say your Monday, Wednesday, Friday sprint, that Tuesday needs to either be an off day or at least a day that complements the next day. I mean, one of my famous sayings is never let today ruin tomorrow. And so the cool thing about Feed the Cats, the program that I talk about with sprinting, is that the dosage is the key to all 5 days. The dosage. So the great question that smart people will ask me is, you're doing some really high CNS activities on X Factor Day. You're not giving them a break. You're going to burn them out. But they don't understand how low our dose is. I say that in a 40-minute time period, a 40-minute X Factor practice, each individual guy is probably going a 1-to-6 work to rest ratio, like 5 seconds on and like 30 seconds of loitering. So we're talking about, they're doing like, a few minutes of work is all they're doing on X Factor Day. Like when I say that we're going to measure bounds, let's say you do 6 pounds and see how far you go. We may do it twice.
Gotcha.
Just twice. And, that doesn't burn out anybody. Same with any type of plyometric, like when I do a clinic presentation, I show all the shit we do on X Factor Day. We don't do all that stuff in one day. We'll pick a few of those things. And my guys are like so tuned in now. Like one of the things, I'm not a gadget guy. My business partner, Corfist, is 100% gadget guy. That's why we fit together well. We're yin and yang in almost everything. So like I am too lazy to buy and bring out jump ropes for X Factor, but I think it'd be a really cool thing. And it's so great to see how smart my athletes have become. I said, if we jumped rope, how would we do it? And just some nobody sophomore would say, we go real fast until we slow down. Exactly. We wouldn't do like, okay, another 3 minutes, let's go. That's not the way we practice. We go real fast. I said, now, obviously an exercise bike has no carryover to sprinting. And we're not even sure that jump rope would. Everything we do in X Factor work, we have a reasonable hunch that possibly this would have a positive effect on sprinting. And also it will do no harm. Well, I think jump rope, I think jump rope's good if you do it right. Now, I don't think an exercise bike I don't have a reasonable hunch that'd be good. But if that's what I was assigned, okay, all you got is these exercise bikes. How would we do it? You'd spin that thing fast as shit until you start to slow down, and then you get off of it and rest for a minute and a half. And then maybe do it again. But we never want to burn the steak, so we're not going to do it like 28 times. So that's a great question, though. X Factor is high intensity, high CNS, but such a low dose.
I'm just curious on your thought too. Would you almost say it helps having the aged athletes that you do also, because just how pliable they are in terms of like nervous system? You can give them a lot of inputs and they can regenerate so fast because of how young they are, that almost like, even though you are very low dosage, you don't have to be super careful of like, oh no, it's a high day every day. Just the micro dosing of all the high intensity elements every day still helps.
I think that's somewhat true, but it's really weird. Like obviously, if you're training like a 12-year-old, there's no such thing as CNS burnout because they have no outputs. Their outputs are so low. But I mean, I coached Marcellus Moore, who at the age of 14 was the fastest kid in the history of the world at that age. At the age of 15, he ran 10.31, which is the Illinois state record. He got third this year at the age of 17. He graduated early, got third in the Big Ten, third in the Big Ten in the 60, and ran a 21:01 and got fourth in the 200. He will graduate from college. Just sounds crazy, before he's 21. But so anyway, so here I'm coaching kids that have no power output, some of them, like my worst freshman sprinters, and a guy that is a Ferrari, um, so they are pliable, the younger kids, but I have to be careful with the older kids. But the low dosage, never burning the steak, is actually more for my Ferraris, my guys that are going to score, and I hate to say it, but make me look good, or forget I said that, cut that out. No, but I'm always telling my coaches that we're not going to spend 80% of our time working with the 20% of the kids who will never score a point for us this year in track. And you got to be careful. I mean, that you spend all your time with kids that can't even skip right, So we want to make sure that we are coaching our best kids a great deal. We don't want to just say, okay, they're pretty good, they don't need work. So most of my stuff is really built for my fastest kids. Matter of fact, I think that if I self-critiqued my program, it is that I do not work our bottom 20% hard enough, because like you say, they are so pliable. They don't have high outputs. So I probably should be an old school, work their ass off type of coach with those guys. But here's the deal. I self-critique a lot. If I did that, they would not like track as much. And I want that bottom 20% to come back the next year a couple inches taller, a little more mature, and all those things. And then maybe they will become, the guys that we really hold dear because they're so damn good. So yeah, it's low dose for everybody. And I think the dosage, once again, is the key to everything we do.
Yeah, that was even going to be a question I had. You kind of ended up answering it, but like you had the super outlier of Marcellus, where it was, even if you're thinking just hypothetically, okay, you translate what you're doing with track, it's easy to be like, oh, well, he's doing that with high schoolers. Like, maybe somebody's working with, sub 10 guys or, whoever. But I mean, 10-3-1 is different than whatever 9-9-5 or something like that. But you're at least getting it in the realm instead of, hey, I'm doing all this with these 11 flat kids, and it creates a little more almost like clout to it when it's like, hey, this system didn't just work with 11 flat kids. It's with, one of the fastest kids a high school has ever seen, and then obviously now it will continue to progress.
Mm-hmm.
And even
it's a good point, because I get asked once in a while. I was actually asked to apply at a major university a year or two ago, but I would have had to move away from my kids and my grandkids and all that kind of stuff, and I didn't even apply. And but I get asked once in a while, because I think deep down people think this is a high school sprint program. That if he thinks this would work in college, he's crazy. And what I think are college coaches are, I'll be nice, they're just idiots. That they are high volume. They all say they're low volume. They are former athletes. They have athletes' resumes. They they pretend to know everything. They're sophisticated complexity all the time. And I would feed the cats at the college level for sure. I would do exactly what I'm doing right now. And the amazing thing is that the average college athlete does not love track and field. They're doing it kind of like it's what their identity is. And they'll do what the coach says and all that kind of stuff. But I would think that college athletes would respond to low dose, high intensity work just as well as anyone else. And just like everyone, we are really, really freaky good at what we love to do. And if one of my slides I have in my presentations is a Purdue sprinter named BJ Stevens that tweeted out to the world that on Monday he hates track, and on Tuesday he hates track, on Wednesday he hates track, and anyway, on Saturday for the meet he loves track, but then on Sunday he's sore and he hates track again. So he hates track 6 days a week. And it got 988 retweets, which means that everybody feels the way he does, that they hate track. And what I say in my presentations is that BJ Stevens would be a hell of a lot better sprinter for me than he would be at Purdue, because he would love track for me. If he didn't love track, I would fix it for him. I want our practices to be the best part of a kid's day. Now, obviously, when we do acidosis tolerance work, which is the key to allowing yourself to sprint farther, when we do acidosis tolerance work, those are nasty, ugly days. And I apologize to my team before we do any acidosis tolerance workout. I totally tell them, this is going to suck. This is just going to be awful. And I feel sorry for you, but this is why we have to do it. And this is why today is more important than anything we'll do for the rest of the week. And here's another great thing. Since you have a 48-hour hangover, there's no practice tomorrow. So I'm constantly, even when we have to put our kids through punishing workouts, I'm constantly worried that they will go home hating track. And I just don't think we can ever be good at things we hate.
Mm-hmm. I was even thinking about like your guys then translating to college. I'm going through the Altus, one of the Altus courses right now. One of the things I saw this morning that made me then think about you was the mark of a great coach at a younger level, whether it's middle school, high school, is the ability of their athletes to continue to develop at higher levels. You don't want Marcellus to run 10.31 for you and then never run that again in college.
Correct.
And so that feeds into itself with the low dosage, and not just from a physical standpoint, from the mental standpoint as well. Hopefully he gets to be in 21, 22, whether he's still in college or running professionally, but hopefully that feeds into the fact that he's going to want to continue to do that. And, maybe you're just as responsible for that as, the time's improving.
Yeah. Two things that came to mind with that is we are not only building a foundation of speed, which I think is really, really important, but we're also building a foundation of love. That if we can have those two things going on, I think that it serves a kid well at the next level. Now, as I said, most colleges are very high volume. There's only a handful of schools that I would ever suggest that one of my sprinters go to, because I just don't buy into the volumes that they put sprinters through, and their rate of injury and their rate of kids quitting the team, and they just replace them with the new recruits. Having said that, I do think that if you can get that at the college level, you can get away with volume much more so than you can get away with at the high school level, because if you're high volume in high school, your cats just won't come out for your team. You just don't attract cats. And when I say cats, they're not just fast twitch athletes. They're athletes that are highly competitive and they don't like to run. This sounds weird, but cats are highly competitive, fast twitch athletes that don't like to run. I always say, if you don't believe me, put a leash on your house cat and go on a jog. I mean, they will absolutely rebel. And that's the same way a fast twitch high school athlete is as well. And that's another thing that that was the whole reason for me going to Feed the Cats 21 years ago, was just a blatant attempt for me to attract those types of athletes to my program. And then if I had those types of athletes, who cared how I trained them, they're going to be really good. And then I found out that low dose training works for all kids. So that's the history of Feed the Cats.
I almost think there's like a benefit too, just from the college realm of, Joel and I have talked about this before, of how much extra stress is added nowadays within just like normal college life, with all the technology and how connected you are to everyone all the time. Like, not just the practice volumes, but everything that's associated with it outside of life, and how that's going to affect their training process in general. plays a huge role too. And that's where the feed the cats mentality would come into play and help out a ton, is like you're mitigating the possibility of so many more or so many less almost injuries essentially.
I love that. And that's the whole idea of a kid-centered program. Instead of a program-centered program, it is a kid-centered program. And one of those college coaches that I would send athletes to is Gabe Sanders at Boston University. He was previously at Stanford, and he spoke at Track Football Consortium. And of course, I fell in love with him when he took kids at Stanford who, as you know, Stanford is really hard to get into. So if your sprint teams, if your 4x4 teams and 4x1 teams can be All-American at Stanford, you are doing some freaky things in practice. And the freaky things in practice he did was very low dose stuff. As a matter of fact, he said at Stanford, because of the stress you're talking about, that he went to a 4-day work week at Stanford. We're talking 4 days of track, 3 days off. And of course, that would be unacceptable at most schools. Like, how am I going to justify my job? I'm just a track coach at this university. We got to go 6 days a week. Well, find something else to do on those other 3 days, because it's better for the kids, especially for sprinters. And now, if I'm a distance coach, yeah, I'm a 7-day-a-week guy. But as sprinters, the more time off, the better.
Yeah, we even touched on it. And kind of, we were talking about it from like a football, not just football, like our performance training, but practice as well, where I think part of the popularity of Feed the Cats and how much it's kind of spread and really blown up, I know both of us have been incredibly influenced by it, is today's, I'm only 27, and I can't even imagine what it's like to grow up with Twitter, Instagram. Like, I didn't have either of those until I was in college, and I'm not that old. So like, it's like the stress of growing up with those new factors that we can't even like imagine. You can look at it as like, oh, these kids are different, blah, blah, blah. Or you can just realize like the inherent stress factors that are just always on them are so much higher, and either you can account for it and have success, or not account for it and then walk into the office and be like, these kids these days, like, either you can account for it and either you're going to win the games or not. The kids are going to feel good or not. They're going to perform well or not. So adjust or not, like, basically you have to figure it out. And I think part of that is recognizing like the proliferation of, smartphones and social media, like that overall stress is just so much higher that the low dosage physical training is, people are starting to trend towards it and then being like, okay, who's doing it well? And you're both done it well and done a ton of publishing of your own work in terms of, hey, here's what we're doing. So I think that's part of the reason, is because people are realizing like, oh goodness, like the world is a little different, and these athletes are being exposed to things that I couldn't even imagine when I was growing up. And so we got to tweak this.
Yep. And the one of the things too, that the Feed the Cats thing, and one of the reasons why it's really catching fire in football right now, is the benefits of coaches who go to the minimal dose thing, who all of a sudden now, it used to be like is a sign of toughness to bring your kids after they play a Friday night high school football game in at 7 the next morning, get them up like they're freaking Navy SEALs or something, and run them on Saturday morning. And then, have a 7-hour coaches meeting on Sunday, and if you're a Feed the Cats football program, you let your kids sleep in on Saturday, and you have like a Zoom meeting or a Google Doc meeting or something, where you are not ruining the family life of your coaching staff. Every football program I've ever been around, when they lose their final game in the playoffs or something, in the coach's office afterwards, somebody will comment, well, at least I get to see my family again. It's kind of like, it's a bittersweet moment. Oh, I wish we wouldn't have lost, but thank God this season's over. And football coaches should never wish away a season because of what they're doing to their family. I know one coach that I get testimonials all the time. They inspire me. And one football coach who's feeding the cats this year says that he was a total meathead for the first 15 years of his career. In the last 2 years, he's fed the cats. He actually got a letter from the wife of one of his assistants thanking him for changing the way he did things. And and that's powerful shit. When a guy can be a better husband and a better father at home, that you do not have to sell your soul to football 18 weeks a year, whatever you do. And you can actually, I believe you can be better by doing less. As soon as you say the practice is only going to be an hour and a half instead of 3 hours, that hour and a half practice is inherently going to be better. You're going to be focused on the things that matter. It's going to be more intense. It's going to be faster. All those things will make you a better team on Friday night.
Yeah. And even for sports that like the high, like football is a relatively low motor skill sport. I mean, quarterbacks throwing and kickers kicking, a little more high intensity motor skill standpoint. But even for sports where it's, baseball, tennis, some of those sports that are used to the repetitiveness of like, oh, I'm just going to go in the cage and whatever, hit for 2 hours. I've seen the benefits of, or with any sport, the kind of day-to-day, or like some schools or whatever call them just like their everydays, like whatever the drills are that they do every day, that almost become just monotonous and end up not having any meaning. And it's just like, oh, the routine. Like I've seen the value of like, hey, you only get 40 swings today. Like the focus goes up, or whatever it is, instead of being like, hey coach, let me get some extra. Just like, no, you actually don't get extra, because it's going to just push your focus. Like, oh, if I don't get it right, I just got extra.
Absolutely.
I got like actually marking it down, even in the sports that require, like, obviously you can't just go in and get 2 swings and be like, all right, I'm good to go. But like finding that sweet spot of still getting enough work, but cutting it down so that the focus is still on.
The Los Angeles Dodgers this past year set every franchise record in hitting, and they did it by limiting time in the cage. Limiting time in the cage. And if you think about it, you can think about anything you do. Should a basketball player shoot 1,000 shots a day, or should he shoot 10 sets of 10 and record the number he makes of each 10? Intent and focus and intensity and meaningful stuff only happens with minimal doses. If I remotely trained a professional basketball player who literally, by the time he graduated from Boston College, could not dunk anymore. And I asked him what his normal days are like. He goes, I play basketball. I go, how much do you play? He goes, probably 3 hours in the morning and 4 hours in the afternoon. I'm like, well, no wonder you got, dead legs. You need to cut that back to like an hour and a half a day. And your practice, you will get more out of an hour and a half than you did 7 hours. And you need to start speed training and doing plyometric work when you're fresh. So that's what you're going to do in the morning. And then you're going to do purposeful, intentional work in basketball. And you're going to stop playing because you just get sloppy and stuff. So it was interesting after him feeding the cat, so to speak, for about 8 weeks. He said, I'm dunking easy now. I feel quicker, blah, blah, blah. And so it's just so hard to break the religion of hard work that we've all grown up with, like Drew Brees told his boys, after the Super Bowl, says, anything is possible if you outwork the God, it's all a bunch of bullshit. It's not about outworking everybody. It's doing stuff that contributes to winning. That's important.
Mm-hmm. So a question I had written down kind of, but you led into it well, was, so you inevitably have some of your kids that are like the great, awesome, hard workers who always are like, we have a ton here. Hey, coach, what can I do extra? What can I do extra? What strategies do you use to focus that so it doesn't turn into the, hey, like for us, I've had an instance where, kid looks terrible in a back squat on some day, and it's like, what's up? I'm like, oh, I ran a bunch of stadium steps last night. Like, maybe like, so what, if you've run into that, kind of how do you focus that energy and target that, whether through education or like specific targeted quote unquote extra work to kind of scratch that itch for them?
That's a hell of a question, because in high school, what happens is that overzealous fathers will sign their kids up to do extra training with guys like you two. Like you'd be making a little money on the side or whatever, and so they will be doing like double training. And the reason why the dads love this is because the dad, wants to be the agent of his kid. Like the dad wants to have a hand in his kid's success. It's ridiculous, really. But basically you have to just keep talking. Basically you have to accept it. It's just, I hate to say it, but you have to accept that this crap is going to go on. But the great thing about the feed the cats mentality is that we are measuring constantly. And if a kid who on the first week was running low ones, like 1.01, 1.02 in the 10-meter fly, if that kid's running a 112 3 weeks later, you like, damn, are you well? I mean, do you have mono? No. Well, why would you go from running 22 miles an hour to 19 miles an hour? I mean, what's wrong with your engine? Well, I'd say, well, are you doing secondary workouts at night? Well, yeah, I'm signed up at Extreme Speed and we're doing this. I go, how's that working out for you? And they just kind of look at me with this sick feeling. And so now the other thing that people will do is, yeah, my football coach is squatting the hell out of me, and I'm like, well, how's that working out for you? And so some of my kids learn how to cheat the weight room a little bit on things that are ruining the next day or ruining the whole next week. And so the fact that we're timing so often, kids will start to learn. It's an interesting thing too. Sometimes kids run slow, and I'll say, you get any sleep at night? And they'll look at me like I talk to their mom and dad or something. That a lack of sleep is, sleep is what reboots your brain. Sleep is the key besides sunshine. Sunshine's the key, but sleep is the other key to dopamine, and sleep's the key to testosterone. Kids that aren't sleeping are not running fast. And so there, we can talk about that as well. But when you're dealing with a group of kids, I'll go back to the fact that you're just going to accept a lot of crap. I mean, some kids will just never sleep. You just keep trying to get them thinking about it. But it's never easy.
Yeah. Even some of I guess the secondary benefit of the timing every day is it forces you as the programmer to not ruin the next day, or not necessarily timing every day, but often, recording often. But even I've heard Derek Hansen talk about, like, he was in like a true high-low Francis kind of model, but then shifting that even towards including some high-intensity stuff on the Francis kind of low days, with the thought process of, if the athletes know they got to do something snappy tomorrow, that's going to change how they treat themselves from the end of practice until the next time you see them. Because it's just, oh, I just know I got to go out there and kind of slop through some, not even if it's like kind of crispy, fast and extensive tempo work, like that's not easy per se. But if it's like, oh, I can just go through and just kind of get through that, like maybe that changes what that previous night looked like. Or if it's, I know I got, some bounds that are being measured and some med ball throws that are being measured, then it changes the mindset of how I'm going to take care of myself. Have you seen any of your athletes, like you kind of led into it, like asking about the strategies? Maybe it's different from high school with high schoolers, because they don't have as many like global stressors, but like any interest in like, hey coach, like can we take care of ourselves better outside? And like, cause they know like, I got to run faster on the next time we're tracking.
Yes, that is definitely when kids are looking forward to practice and they know they're going to be measured. Um, I tell people that there's a lot of things that define culture. And I think sometimes we define culture by like off the field stuff, like getting together for pizza or something like that. That's not the kind of culture I'm talking. I'm talking about a culture of high performance. And one of the things I define our culture as is that my kids will carry their spikes on their book bag because they know they will be slow in practice if they're running in jogging shoes. So that's what I mean about culture. Culture is the fact that I don't think I've ever had a sprinter all year long run without spikes on. I mean, if he forgets his spikes, he will borrow a pair because they care. One of the great things about cats, and cats have a bad reputation and everything. There's a lot of bad things about cats, but one of the great things about cats is their competitive nature. Even if they're not racing, I tell people that when we time a kid, that my kids either celebrate or swear at the end of when they hear their time. They celebrate or swear. They're very aware of how fast they are and they care. And I love that about coaching cats. So I do usually guys will, when they ask me, Coach, how can I get better? It's really like, what extra work can I do? As you guys know, that's the way we're brought up. And they don't like my, like drink more water, sleep more at night. Telling them things like eat things that are real food, not out of a box or a bag. Eat fruits, vegetables, clean meats. Um, those are things they don't want to hear. But I will tell people that I will constantly tell my team the things they need to be doing. And then I'll also be real with my guys and say, not more than 5 of you will do what I just said. Not more than 5. And they'll look at each other like, I think he knows us, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't keep telling kids what's good for them. It's just like when I would try to do book recommendations to my chemistry classes. And I tell them, I realize that only 2 of you will read this book, but I still need to make this recommendation to you because I will improve the life of those 2 people that read this book. And I think as coaches, we need to never get too down on ourselves. It goes back to the acceptance thing, that you're not going to get your entire team to buy in, but that doesn't mean you don't continue to offer the correct recommendations and just keep pounding them about what makes them better.
I almost think that's also something you could take into account with college programs too, because I mean they get 20 hours a week for some of them, right? And I definitely know coaches that try to use all 20 hours and just like control it, even if it's just team mandated self-care time, where it's like, why don't we just let them stay and sleep? Like go back to your dorm, lay in bed and nap instead of come in and I have to like tell them to foam roll. Like I think they're probably good if they just get a little bit of extra sleep.
Yes, in high school I call it teenage daycare. That when I tell coaches that I will give my sprinters a day off after a lactate workout, they'll be like, "Are you kidding me? The athletic director will allow you not to practice?" And I'm like, "Yeah, my athletic director's scared of me. He would never, And then sometimes they'll say, "Wait, did your distance kids have to practice?" I go, "Yeah." I go, "Well, what do they say?" I said, "Well, about 11 years ago, one of them asked me why they had to practice and the sprinters didn't." I said, "Well, because you're not fast enough. If you're a slow ass distance runner, you got to run every day, so nobody's asked since then. So no, we have fun with all that stuff. And I do agree though that coaches somehow feel, well, this is hilarious, but the biggest problem with Feed the Cats in football, and so many coaches have told me this, they said, "Coach, I totally agree with everything you say, but the first time we lose, I might get fired. I go, you're right. You might get fired the first time you lose because you're not outworking the competition. He goes, exactly. He goes, oh, and the fathers of my kids, if we're not running them till they're falling on their hands and knees at the end of practice, they're thinking that I'm creating softness, that I'm not turning boys into men, and so there's all this pressure in football to just totally crush kids, and and it's real. It's totally real. I coached with a guy one time that gave their high school team Thursdays off. He said everything we could walk through on Thursday, we could do on Friday after school. So we're just going to do that. And there was a special board meeting to fire him because somebody saw him out on the golf course on Thursday. He's like, what the hell? This football coach, he's not like practicing every day. We got to fire him. He went, I think 9-1, lost in the 10th game or something. But no, it's real. And coaches feel that pressure. I often say that football coaches would rather lose than to be outworked. And it is real. And I have football coaches that would agree with me. Say, yes, I would rather lose on Friday night than be called soft. And it's like, oh, that's your problem, man.
Yeah. And yeah. Luckily, I think at least in college football, it's some people are open at least enough to with how quick athletic directors are pulling the plug on some programs now. It's like, okay, hopefully there's at least the incentive to let's figure out the best way to actually win the game instead of just the way we've done it. I mean, even Saban making the pick for his performance staff that he did is probably going to have a large cascade effect.
Wow.
Like we were dancing in the streets when that happened. Because
that's a wow, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, okay, Saban, once he gets the ball rolling, like, it's not just like other college coaches trying to keep up, but so many high school coaches who look up to those programs, and whether it's Blue or Matt Ray, like publicizing what they're doing, it's like, oh, like there's not just one way to do it, and not that you have to exactly emulate what they're doing or whatever, but it's nice to see it like really stick at the highest levels, and hopefully it can kind of start to trickle down a little bit. So
yes, I talked to a friend of mine, Ryan Grubbs, who's a good strength conditioning coach. He was at Purdue last year, and I said, what's the number one problem with strength and conditioning? And he said, everybody wants to know, what does Alabama do? I mean, it's like we all want to be like Alabama, so what do they do? And for years, their S&C model was something that I thought was bullshit. But now it's like, oh my God, now they got the best S&C people in the world. So it is really good to see that happen. But I think it's also really important to realize that Alabama is playing a rigged game. They recruit 5-star athletes and they amazingly turn into pretty good college football players. And so what I think is, I want to know what Appalachian State's doing. I want to know what those teams that don't get the 5-star athletes. I want to know what Kurt Hester is doing at La Tech. When La Tech went out and beat Miami's ass, and Miami had 34 4- and 5-star athletes, 34 of them, and La Tech had, I can't remember, it's either 1 or 0. Anyway, they were totally outmatched, and I believe they beat Miami in the bowl game 14-0. And that's why Kurt Hester spoke at our last TFC, is because we want people like Kurt Hester who do more with less. We don't care what Alabama does.
Yeah. Kurt's program we went down and played them this year, and they were the best team we played all year. He's got something special going on there. And even just the 2-hour conversation before the game I had with him was worth the price of admission for sure.
Yeah, I got to drink some beers with him on 2 different nights. So yeah, he's a great guy.
Sweet. All right, well, I think that's probably a good wrapping up point. I really appreciate you coming on, Coach. This will be, me and Andrew talked about it before. Maybe this will be something we'll have to try to get you on here as much as possible, because we really have both been influenced by not only your work, but how much you actively publicize it and try to proliferate it as much as possible. So we appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I had a great time. I like I say, with this pandemic keeps going on, we may need to talk every couple of days.
For real. All right. Well, we appreciate it, Coach, and stay safe, and best of luck to you and your family, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.